which is a very strange thing to see in the Spider-Man universe, because if you know anything about
TNMP, the Nerdy Misfit Podcast, with your hosts, Connor O'Neill and Matthew Hughes.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Nerdy Misfit Podcast.
Howdy.
Today we've got another review-style podcast. This is covering
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
the new Disney Plus animated show.
Yes. Air date of basically February of this month, 2025. I think the first 2 or 3 episodes came out the last Tuesday or Wednesday in January, but basically it all came out in February. 10 episodes, Marvel Animation Studio, obviously superhero, action, adventure. On IMDb, it's sitting at a 7.3 out of 10. And then on Rotten Tomatoes, it's sitting at a 67% for the audience score and a 97% for the critic score.
Dang.
A difference of 30%,
That is
which is
pretty
crazy to
crazy.
me.
Yeah.
The fact that, that a 97 for critics, that's high in my opinion. Not in a bad way per se, but I don't know if it deserves to be that high. But anyways, if you guys didn't watch it, spoilers ahead. Watch it, come back, or don't, and just listen to the episode.
Yeah, and
up to
then
you guys.
you get a gist of it.
Exactly. I'll give it a little bit of a synopsis here. Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is the name of the show. Explores Peter Parker's origin story in early days using the Spider-Man persona. Series set in an alternate timeline within the multiverse where Peter gains his abilities through a temporal paradox caused by Doctor Strange time traveling while he is fighting a symbiotic alien. Another change in the universe that is that Norman Osborn becomes Peter's mentor instead of Tony Stark, as appears in the MCU main timeline. Now, originally the show, when it got first released at San Diego Comic-Con a few years back, it was supposed to be connected to the MCU. This is just supposed to be a little prequel before Civil War to kind of see how Peter came to be inside the MCU, and then later on it changed to its own little thing.
Yeah. It's still connected to the MCU, but obviously not the main continuity of the MCU.
Exactly. Main characters / probably your core group of characters.
Oh, do you really need to cover that?
Well,
Spider-Man?
Well, obviously Peter Parker, and obviously Harry Osborn, Norman Osborn, and then the other two that people may not be familiar with is Lonnie Lincoln and Nico Minoru.
Yeah, who was in another Marvel TV show.
Great TV show.
So
Very underrated. But initial thoughts, Connor, what did you think?
really didn't like the animation. Totally understood what they were going for. The almost like you're watching an actual comic book.
Yeah.
Kind of has that more old school art style to it. It's just I don't know if it was just me, but the frame rate choice plus the combination of the flat 2D, but also some of the 3D animation really just, my eyes did not care for it, or my head did not. There were scenes that felt smooth, and then there were scenes that were just
jarring.
Yeah, very not great. Complete opposite of smooth, if you will. So that was my initial thoughts. But I will say the story overall kind of outshines any distaste towards the animation, because for the most part you kind of get used to it. It's obviously not my favorite, but you kind of get over it, and you'll notice some, like you said, some parts that are not smooth, and you're just like, okay, well, that's just obviously what to expect with the I liked the X-Men 97 more than I liked this for animation style overall.
That's fair.
But I also liked how we saw some underutilized characters, or for some people, which will just be new characters in general.
Yeah.
That was nice to see. Got a lot of different Easter eggs, whether it was just
There's so many
head
in
nods
this
to
show.
things, or just straight up having characters show up. Also just different origin stories for villains or main characters as well. A couple reversals of certain characters. And yeah, like you mentioned before, obviously the big one being that Norman is taking on this mentor-ish role, which is a very strange thing to see in the Spider-Man universe, because if you know anything about
who Norman Osborn
you would know that
this
this is Peter Parker's Joker, if you will.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right? This is the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I feel like the whole time you're kind of like,
Waiting.
when's the Goblin showing up?
Yeah. and then the glider shows up at one point,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was like, wait, I was like, oh,
Are we
is
gonna
he
get
gonna be
him?
the Goblin before the end of the
Yeah.
show? Like,
But looks like we're gonna be waiting a little longer.
yeah,
But yeah, it was cool to see a lot of other characters show up. Some of the Easter eggs that are also in it, and a lot of just paying homage to literally OG Spider-Man comics in a lot of ways.
definitely.
A lot of characters taken and storylines, whether it was literally following a very similar path of a storyline that's been told in comics, or doing their own kind of retelling. Big one being like Spider-Man's like era of not being able to find out who he is and going through all the different suit renditions, which is something that's happened in the comics. So it was kind of fun seeing those occur within an animated series. But yeah, I think overall my initial thoughts were that I wasn't going to like it because of the animation, but you definitely stay for the story.
Yeah.
And it's not just for Peter. I think that that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
He's not the only character you end up caring about.
For sure. For me, I like, again, similar to you, the animation really wasn't my favorite. I mean, particularly the eyes. In
anytime
adults
they like
more than
flipped
anything. Yeah.
a character like turned around, which was very common in fights, like combat, was more noticeable when you're like, just didn't like it.
Yeah.
Which was funny because sometimes when he was just web slinging normally, it was smooth.
Great. Yeah.
But whenever he was fighting, you were kind of like the scorpion fights.
Yeah. Jar. Like,
Yeah.
It was just really bad. Yeah. Wasn't terrible. Like, I've seen obviously worse, but yeah, I don't know. Once I got past the animation, I thought the story was pretty solid overall, taking slightly different version of the MCU. Like, there was constant references, like
References to
we
things that
knew
are going on in the
where
MCU.
it was happening.
We saw like literally on TV Civil War.
Civil War, the Accords got mentioned a few times. Tony shows up working with Thunderbolt Ross.
Yep.
Like a lot of references with that, which was fun. I think when I was watching the first episode, again, like, I haven't read a Spider-Man comic in a hot minute outside of a couple one-shots or like, you know. So me forgetting that Tombstone's real name is Lonnie, like it didn't click until later on when he's like, "Oh, we'll call you Tombstone," and I was like, "Oh, it's that dude."
Yeah.
Because like when I was watching the first episode, when it like switched the narrative from Peter to Lonnie,
Yeah, which was a good story
I was
too.
like, "Oh,
I don't
that's
believe that's
interest-
quite his
no, I believe
origin
he's
story. I know that
born-
the Diox 3 is accurate to how Tombstone gets his super strength.
yeah, but I believe he was
But-
albino already.
Yeah, I think so as well.
I'm not entirely sure. Don't quote us on that. But
And also, yeah, it was just interesting because in this story we're following someone who's kind of like if you wanted to say peak of high school, like high school quarterback, gets good grades, is friends with everyone, hard to hate because that's how good of a person he is, does everything right, is from a rough neighborhood but is doing everything he can for his family.
yeah,
And then this is how he gets in this situation of joining a gang because he's doing it to protect his brother.
yeah,
And by the end of the show, we see that he becomes the gang leader, and I'm sure we'll see the evolution into the Tombstone we know
yeah.
from
There
the
is
comics.
like if you look at his hands on like at the very
They're starting to
end,
like gray /
grayish,
white out, yeah.
But yeah, do you want to do positives and negatives first before we get into the plot, or?
So I didn't really put down too much for plot because it is a very episodic.
Yeah, I did more Easter eggs.
yeah.
than-
It was very episodic, and the overarching story is more Peter learning to be his own hero, I would say.
Yeah.
Where Norman wants him to be one thing, but obviously Peter has a slightly different thought process of how he wants to
I
handle
have
things.
it. It felt like CW in a way, like early Flash, early Arrow, where like they're trying to figure out who they are and where they fit into things, and they always have that mentor. There's like, you need to do it this way, and you're like, but
I need to do it my own way,
yeah,
kind of
and then
thing.
you can't quite trust the mentor because you know something's up, and like he had like his group of his
Yep.
techie friend and like the girl and
He had his
the love
crew.
interest. Yeah, so it felt very CW-y.
And it leads to like Norman's being sketchy,
Yeah.
and then it leads to basically being a circle, right?
Yeah.
Where it leads to this point where Norman creates this device that he wasn't really telling any of the all these kid interns that he had hired that are helping them create
yeah,
basically what
a
is
time portal.
time portal, but also initially it sounds like it's going to be similar to Thor, where it's going to be like the
a
gate.
doorway. Yeah,
And then due to Doctor Strange trying to stop it, we end up having some sort of time loop going on that actually is the whole reason Spider-Man becomes Spider-Man, which I really was not a big fan of that version of how Peter. I didn't mind seeing Doctor Strange show up and for some reason there's a spider that fell onto him, but then reconnecting it to Peter from the future,
creating Peter in the past.
Yeah, that I don't like because
it was a little weird.
I don't like that style of time travel storytelling where it's like, oh, well, how did Peter from the past truly, like the loop gets confusing and doesn't make much sense.
Anything has happened will happen because it already happened.
Yeah. Don't love that. But I will say a lot of the Easter eggs I did also put in there. We see Doctor Strange.
Yep.
Without him, apparently, in this universe, there is no Spider-Man. Yeah. So worthy to note.
I thought, like, when I was watching the first episode that the symbiote was going to be like a Kraven the Hunter.
Oh, you thought it was going to be someone, like when it came through already.
Exactly, yeah.
But it was clearly probably something from the planet, maybe.
Yeah, it was just from Clintar? I can't remember the name.
The symbiote planet,
yeah.
So we get that. We obviously see, like you mentioned, Osborn's glider.
Yeah.
We see the Scorpion origin story.
Yeah.
We saw Doc Ock. We also saw a really cool reference to the 2004 Spider-Man 2 movie where Norman Osborn says he can't harness the power of the sun, which is obviously a reference to what Doc Ock was trying to accomplish in Spider-Man 2, which was kind of cool. We got Amadeus Cho, who's one of the Hulks.
Totally awesome Hulk.
We got Daredevil. And then at the end, we saw
Charlie Cox.
And we saw Finesse at the end. Who happened to be one of the interns with Peter.
Yeah. Who is actually Taskmaster's daughter in the comics. Fun fact.
We saw Norman twisting the famous Spider-Man line into a very much more ego-based line, which was with great power comes great
respect.
Yeah, great respect.
You're like, oh.
And Peter kind of figures out the responsibility part on his own. It's never said, but
I'm kind of okay with it. I feel like that line's just been.
I think that's on purpose. That when he was saying it, I think they totally know what they're doing. Because I felt beta where I was about to be like,
"Is he gonna say it? Are they gonna give it?"
I was
to
like,
Norman?
Norman better not say that.
That's how I felt. I think it's like episode 8 or something. Harry goes, "Go get him, Tiger," and I'm like, "That's Mary Jane's line." I was like, just didn't fit well in my opinion.
Obviously, like you said, we had the Sokovia Accords.
Yeah.
Which was it's just a nice touch that we're starting to relate things to the MCU, even if it's not the main universe continuity. Finesse, like I said, made her animated debut.
Speed Demon and Unicorn and Chameleon.
Diox X chemical being used to make Tombstone. Richard Parker at the end.
Yeah, which is a fun. That was fun. I didn't expect that to be the ending.
You didn't? No, yeah, that was.
I didn't see that coming.
I didn't. Really. Yeah, once she was walking in at first, I was like, "Is she gonna see Uncle Ben?" Because that would be
That's
really.
what I thought originally too. I was like, "Is Uncle Ben alive? Just he's in prison?"
But no, it was Peter's dad.
Which is fun. I think if they explore that properly in season 2, it'll be fun because obviously we see it in Amazing Spider-Man 2, the Andrew Garfield movie. It starts off with his parents being on the plane, and being agents and stuff, and then there is a deleted scene in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
They tried to do so much with that movie.
That movie had so much potential, but I mean, when you're tackling here's Green Goblin, which is actually just Hobgoblin. His parents are actually spies. They're both dead and alive. Gwen Stacy's gonna die. Here's Electro.
Yeah, you're going through the whole.
Here's Rhino at the beginning and at the end.
Plus hints to Vulture and everything.
Yeah, there's so many references. Doc Ock, I think, was in that his.
Oh yeah, it was in the bottom of the Oscorp building or whatever.
A lot. Other Easter eggs, obviously, Speed Demon, Unicorn, Chameleon shows up briefly, which I thought was interesting. Rhino's dad, is in it for a little bit, part of that group,
the Russian group or whatever.
Yeah. Obviously, Lonnie becoming Tombstone at the end, like you said, Amadeus Cho, Nico being part of the Runaways.
Yeah, who's Peter's best friend.
Peter's best friend. We do get reference to her magical
powers. Yeah, she uses to communicate with her mother.
Yeah. Her name in the comics, her hero name in quotation, is Sister Grimm. So we'll see if that
ends up connecting to other MCU shows. I mean, we do have other magic shows. So.
Yeah, we do. Another one too, which is very new in Marvel Comics, is Pearl. She's a character in the comics called Wave, and she's like the character only got created 5-6 years ago. She is relatively new.
Yeah, she's kind of like the love interest of Peter in this one.
Yeah.
Girl, Did they say they were the same age? I could have sworn that she was like 3 years older
2
than
or
Peter.
3 years
but then they're in the
older.
same class.
It didn't make sense. Yeah, I didn't understand that part.
One of the likes I did have for this series was it did actually focus on Peter being a high intellect person within the world, which I feel like we've mentioned it, but in the MCU, I do feel is overlooked how intelligent Peter is.
Definitely.
Because not of his own doing, but they make him so reliant on Tony and other characters that they never get really show off how intelligent Peter truly is. And yeah, he goes to a school for the gifted for intelligence, but like they don't really.
We don't actually see how smart he actually is.
Yeah, and in this, I think it did a really great job having Norman, obviously for the other reasons, picks Peter, but he thinks Peter has the potential because of his intelligence and at his age and to bring him into for an internship. And then Peter also helping Doc Connors create the basically the power source for what ends up being the portal device.
Yeah. I do say I think as a whole this season ends like it ties up loose ends, but then it just foreshadows so many things at the end.
It sets up so many things.
Like the Venom symbiote being left on Earth is a big one. Norman definitely doing
obviously
something
we have Norman,
with that.
Doc Ock.
Doc Ock is still around. Peter's dad being alive. You have.
I know they set up like that. It feels like the show's going to be going for seasons.
Yeah,
not just like 2.
I'm
like
kind of okay with.
Like
they did.
Feels like 3, 4, 5 seasons it could go.
Yeah, I mean, like if they were to clean up the animation a little bit, I'd be even more stoked because like you even have the whole Finesse and Daredevil. At the end.
Finesse and Daredevil.
How that's gonna connect to.
And Daredevil never really told Peter anything.
No, he's just like, don't trust.
Yeah,
don't trust Oscorp. Bye. And you're like. But why
so
not?
many villains for Peter to potentially fight or see them have their own origin story and how they show up in
Get
this
a Sinister
world.
Six at some point. Like we got the people, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited because I feel like this is one of the better animated series we've seen from Marvel, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, in my opinion, is
from a story, but also being connected in a way, but just loosely, like. Which is, I feel like, better. It's a better way of handling it. It doesn't have to be, this is the MCU. I like that it's like, hey, this is MCU adjacent.
Yeah. And, like, obviously they do a very, very subtle Easter egg to What If. I don't know if you caught it or not. So at the very end of the show, when he's on, like, the thing talking to Doctor Strange, when it pans over, you see the Watcher in the stars.
Okay. I didn't see the Watcher.
It's so quick, like a blink and you'll miss it kind of thing, where I was like, oh, wait. I literally went back. I was like, did I see that correctly? It was good. Animation was weird, but I literally have it here, but I've seen worse. If anyone has seen clips from the Neil Patrick Harris Spider-Man show.
I mean, in general, there's just obviously worse animation. It's
different.
It's unique, and I can see what they're going for. The art style is very cool. It's a very cool concept. It's just the mixture with 3D animation and the force of the lower frame rate. If at least that's what I'm assuming is going on, that makes it kind of have that choppier feel. It just didn't work for me. Music, the opening was
freaking love the opening.
Was the like the original Spider-Man theme song remixed into a hip hop song, but also it really had this like 90s to early 2000s like opening for an animated show. I
loved it. I added it to my playlist. Like it's a solid.
It was
banger.
a very good opening for sure.
I tossed this in with music, but voice acting was fine in my opinion. Love to see Charlie Cox voicing Daredevil. When I was going through the loop a little bit of like who was voicing who, the woman that voices Aunt May is Carrie Walgren. She's big in the anime community. 2 of the biggest ones I found that we would know is she voices Haruhara and Fooly Cooly.
Okay,
and she's also the voice of Saber in the Fate series.
I didn't love Peter.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like it fit like young teenage Peter. I don't know. That could just
That's
be
fair.
like
it was the same one that
I don't think
voiced
like
in What
Drake
If.
Bell's the best, but he does have a younger sounding voice that kind of fit Peter more in that series.
I can understand that.
This one didn't feel like it fit as well for me personally.
Yeah. I think it was okay overall. Like it wasn't like stunning at
I didn't
all.
love it at first. It did
grew
get used to it, but like definitely not my favorite at all.
Yeah.
Some of the positives I guess we can jump into. I like the different take on Peter's mentor being especially someone that we all recognize as a villain.
Yeah.
For Peter, and who still very well could become a Peter. Become Peter's arch nemesis, if you will, and knows who he is already.
Yeah.
Similar to the Spider-Man 1 from the 2000s, right? Like Green Goblin knew who Peter was.
It's all coming together
It just makes it so much more insane that he knows his identity
right off the bat.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's gonna build the tension too, right? Especially like
as Norman keeps veering off into the darker side of things, for sure.
You know, he's gonna be like, "Oh, Doc Ock was onto something," and this whole shebang. You know, especially with something we haven't mentioned yet is Harry at the very end creating his own company, like Web.
Yep.
And inviting all these characters that some of them we've seen. If you take a look on that, when he's calling everyone up and all the list of names that we see, one of them is like Neil or Ned Leeds, which is obviously we see in the MCU. All the smart kids that we saw in the Oscorp. One
Tombstone
of them
was invited.
Tombstone was invited. Max Dillon was also on that list, so potentially a young Electro we'll see on the uprise. So that will be interesting.
I did like the change to Harry. This is more of I like when the writers bring the real world or stuff that's very similar to the real world into current stories, because Spider-Man's a very old character.
Yeah.
Right? We've adapted, like we've seen a lot of adaptations when it comes to J. Jonah Jameson, where he no longer runs a newspaper because it's not really as relevant anymore, right? He has like his own
online
podcast platform that he runs. And I really liked having Harry be like just another one of like a famous rich kid. Like, oh, my dad's and I'm a rich kid. So he's popular on social media.
Yeah.
And it felt like they took a lot of like almost Jaden Smith-esque vibes to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see that.
But I really enjoyed the character. I thought Harry was great. Very down to earth for being a rich kid, but nevertheless,
just wants to help out his dad. Just, you know.
Yeah, and he lonely, like when you're like so popular, but you're also lonely.
Yeah.
So it was cool to see him kind of interact with Peter, being literally basically his only friend, and then kind of getting to know Peter's friends. So I did enjoy that. Obviously, I enjoyed all the different character Easter eggs. Yeah. I think my favorite fight was probably the Daredevil fight.
It kind of feels partially out of place, but then by the end of it, you're like, oh, this is setting up for season 2.
And it was very Daredevil-y, you know, where he's like very cryptic and obviously really good at hand-to-hand combat. So I liked it. And I liked Peter figuring out what suit he wanted and how he finally ended up with the more iconic classic Spider-Man suit.
For me, similar to you, the intro was a bop. It's such a solid song. Quite enjoyed it. The show, I think, was a good way to introduce like B-list, C-list characters that we're not familiar of, like Speed Demon, Unicorn, even Chameleon. Like, I know that was the first villain Spider-Man ever fought in the comics, but I think he's in the new Kraven movie. I haven't seen it, but
okay, yeah.
But because I think it's like his brother in the comics, like Kraven and Chameleon's related somehow. I can't remember exactly how on the top of my head.
I know that he played a very prominent role in the 90s TV show because he's like one of Kingpin's go-to henchmen, like higher ups, if you will. And obviously he ends up being heavily involved with the Red Skull in that series.
Yeah. But I mean, we could definitely, if this show grows as much as it feels like it could, we'll definitely be able to see other Marvel superheroes.
Oh, and I'm sure we'll get a Sinister Six, and we'll get a lot of exploration. Maybe, Peter getting invited to the Avengers, or to see maybe if he should be part. And maybe they'll use what we are currently seeing as Sam Wilson's Avengers. Maybe we don't end up we
see the next generation.
Maybe we see the Sam Wilson becoming Captain America, and we get to see that kind of unfold. Maybe we get to see President Ross.
That is the big question. Is like, because of in the timeline, like, will we eventually see the blip happen in this show? How will that affect it? Will we get a half a season?
Maybe
a whole season of the blip?
Peter in this one doesn't get blipped.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, because he wouldn't be there, so then he wouldn't be.
Which will make him an adult faster.
Yeah.
So it could do a little bit more of a time skipperoo. Or the blip does happen, and it's just an easy way to skip over to get closer to where we are.
Could be. I like the introduction of Doc Ock. Obviously, there was like Easter eggs leading up to the big reveal.
Yeah.
But I wasn't fully sold on it yet. I was like, are they going to introduce Doc Ock? Are they not? And then, when the garage door
and they introduce him in the most, like, he's wearing his, like...
cliche green and yellow.
It's the most classic ugly color scheme.
I'm like, you know what? I got to give it to the show. Even Doctor Strange had his classic look on.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'm very happy that they did classic looks, and that's why I was kind of like waiting. I was like, Peter's gonna get his good classic suit by the end of this.
Has
Like,
to, right?
Has to, right? Speaking of which, another fun thing about that is in the opening throughout the entire show, you usually see him in the white and blue suit, which looked good.
Yeah, it was
It
cool.
was
I
fun
liked
to
it.
see. In the last episode, they switch it out in this intro to his classic suit now that he has it, kind of thing, which is fun. Yeah, I think all the villain designs were solid. I'm very happy that they were comic booky accurate.
Yeah,
I think
for
only
the
a
most
couple
part.
of them weren't. Entirely.
Actually, my biggest negative is probably just Scorpion.
Yeah.
That is there were definitely some
Interesting
creative
takes
on
different
characters
ways.
or changes to characters.
Mhm.
But I feel like this is the one I disliked out of all of them, mostly because it almost doesn't make sense for the character anymore.
Yeah,
Right? They start by introducing him as already a gang leader, conveniently of a gang called Scorpion.
yeah,
And for Scorpion's original origin, the name Scorpion is so deliberate. It's purposely called Scorpion because they're trying to get Spider-Man, and Scorpion is like the predator to
Yeah.
a spider, where they're like, hey, we're going to do it with a scorpion because those are better than spiders kind of idea.
I feel like this origin of this Scorpion came from the idea they had for Scorpion in the MCU. Because at the end of the Tom Holland's first Spider-Man, when Vulture gets arrested and gets put in prison, he meets Mark Garment in prison.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's kind of like, oh yeah, like if
He's
this is
already
gonna
been in
be
trouble or
connected-
something?
Yeah,
I don't remember
But-
his exact what's going on. I think it was J. Jonah Jameson hired him to actually spy on Peter
yes, because he
to
wanted
figure out
to know
how
he's getting such
he's getting good photos
Yeah,
of Spider-Man, and he can never figure it out. And then
That's
J. Jonah Jameson's like, we're working on something. I'll pay you to be basically the lab rat, and
Yeah.
that's how he ends up going crazy.
Was this before or after they introduced the Spider Slayers? Was this like
think it
the
was
first step into becoming the Spider Slayers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I want to say this was after the
Okay.
Spider Slayers.
Okay.
But yeah, they basically just try to recreate Spider-Man, but with
Scorpion.
with Scorpion, and that's because Scorpion is the predator, or like
Mhm.
wins in a fight against a spider.
Yeah,
if you will.
it definitely felt like they were kind of.
It just
like-
felt so convenient. We're like, oh wow,
Yeah.
his gang leader, and he's the Scorpion gang leader, and he also ends up getting a Scorpion
suit.
device. It's not even a full suit,
No,
really.
it's a backpack.
Yeah,
with a
backpack and a
tail.
helmet. And he then just so happens to make remarks that like, oh, a spider should never turn on a scorpion, turn its back on a scorpion. And you're like, okay, well, that's only because your gang is so conveniently named.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be like, it felt like it was kind of inspired by the Serpent Society, because there's not too many gangs inside Marvel, really. Like everything kind of goes back to either like Kingpin or the Hand. Like those are the two.
Yeah, but you
big
could argue that
ones.
those are, well, those are more like crime syndicates, really.
Yeah,
But yeah,
like people fall into those categories.
and I feel like they just absorb gangs. Like I feel like that's what I've always kind of thought of Kingpin is like, if there's other street gangs, like he just takes them over, and it's like either you work for me or you're done.
You don't.
Yeah.
or you don't work at all.
Or you don't. You ain't working.
You ain't
anymore.
working. You know. I think I kind of get what they were trying to do, because with Lonnie's story being so pushed in like the gang area, they had to try and.
Yeah, but
connect
they
it
could have gone
back,
other ways.
but-
It didn't have to be Scorpion is the main thing. They could have had other characters. They could have picked other Spider-Man villains to bring in to. They literally could have just had the Kingpin. And
I
it
feel
would
like they probably wouldn't have done that. I guess no, because
well, we don't know what's going on with Daredevil is the main thing, right? And
Yeah.
I think we saw recently that the Kingpin, like the actor for Kingpin, is not coming back. So it makes
Yeah.
me feel like it's might get wrapped up in the new Daredevil show. As of recording this, it isn't out, but it will be out.
Yeah.
Basically, when
today, when this episode comes out, either the first episode
well,
came out yesterday or what, sometime soon, March 4th. Whenever.
But we
that
haven't
is.
seen any of the new Daredevil series yet. But yeah, maybe it does
Speaking of
wrap
which,
up the Kingpin.
Punisher got greenlit for a new season as well.
Oh, very
before
nice.
this show, before Daredevil even came out, which is kind of crazy. But
So I just think that it could have been a different Spider-Man villain.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be Scorpion. It just
like I didn't hate it. It was
didn't
just
work for me.
weird. Like if you don't know Scorpion's origins from the comics or the '90s show, then you're gonna be like, oh, cool.
And we haven't seen J. Jonah
Yeah.
Jameson
I
yet.
haven't seen J. Jonah Jameson. Curious if he's gonna be connected. And pop
I feel
up
like he
or
probably
not.
will show up soon.
sooner than later. You know.
Yeah.
It is confirmed
As
that,
Spider-Man grows.
As Spider-Man grows, yeah, definitely. It is confirmed that Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider will be in season 2.
I did see that, yeah.
So I'm curious how that's gonna connect. If they're gonna do
And she's
multiverse, or is it?
She has to come from another universe,
It has
right?
to, be,
has
right?
to.
Like
Like Spider-Gwen's whole thing is her
such a good
big death is Peter.
yeah.
So she got to come from another
She's got it.
universe.
I would love an animated show on
Just following.
her origin with like Peter being the lizard and then her accidentally like being there and him dying.
Yeah.
And just
Tragic.
It's such a good story. And then they're like in a music band called the Mary Janes, and it's basically all of Peter's love interests over the years just in a girl band together.
Yeah, if you've never read the Spider-Verse Into the Spider-Verse comic, that is her
Edge of the
original Edge of
Spider-Verse.
Spider-Verse, that is her
Yeah.
original origin. You guys should read it. It's very solid. Depressing.
But so good.
So good.
Yeah, pretty much have the same negative. I mean, it's just Scorpion. Enjoyment, I put 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think it was
It'd be a
solid.
little bit higher if the animation was a little bit better.
Yeah,
but it's
I would
alright.
say 8 out of 10 for sure. I can see why the critics liked it so much, because so many OG Spider-Man stories are referenced, or an homage to them is made within all in such a short time too.
Yeah.
10 episodes. They do a really good job of kind of hitting all different like years or decades of the character
I would agree with that. Yeah.
with this very cool classic comic book art style. Just for me, the 3D animation in combination with that just didn't work for me, but the story was good, the characters were good, and it was cool that you weren't. I do feel like Spider-Man, you're often hyper focused on just what's going on with Pete, so it was really cool to kind of be following other characters and how they're feeling, and as some of them maybe learn about Peter and how that affects them, and because it is more than just Peter, and the big thing is always, I'm just hiding my identity because I don't want anyone to get hurt, but that also does affect his friends when they find out, and how that affects them.
I mean, yeah, when Nico finds out, it's like that's detrimental to their friendship.
Yeah, it's
mean, Harry was
heartbreaking, and
stupid
she
and
thinks
just-
that she's like, she's Peter's best friend, she's his rock, but really he couldn't come to her about one of the biggest things in the biggest thing in his entire life.
Exactly.
So I did enjoy the focus on other characters and how you actually care for them. Like, you're like, oh, I know what's going on with Pete. It's kind of cool to see what's going on with this character, and how we're seeing the rise of Peter and the fall of Tombstone, right? Like into like two different paths.
Yeah.
So really like that. Interested to see how Norman keeps spiraling down, and what they opt to, if they go the full Goblin route, like Goblin King style route, or if they go just the suit with enhanced strength and whatnot.
Yeah. It's definitely that they've set a good base for what their show could be, with referencing so many different villains, with Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Speed Demon, Unicorn, Chameleon, Rhino.
Do they have Star Wars 8 on it?
They Well, no, it just goes to show you this is how you can tell a story with referencing characters.
And
like
assuming they have a plan with all of them.
Yes, assuming they have a plan.
I mean, that's what you assumed for Star Wars.
Yeah, true that. True.
You're like, oh man, they set up so many cool
Man,
things.
episode
Can't wait
7
to see
was
what.
so good, and then just.
But hopefully they
destroyed.
keep hitting it out of the park, and I think this can be one of the better, if not right up there, for animated Marvel shows.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. But alas, yeah. I mean, final thoughts recommendation. I think the show is a fun way to introduce you to some characters inside Marvel that you may not be super familiar with. If you're a Spider-Man fan, if you want to watch a good, solid story within an animated.
Fun,
Disney,
quippy. I thought that the quips.
Yep.
I thought they nailed the
Humor.
writing, the humor for him perfectly.
Yeah.
He never stopped talking, except the one time he got serious against Scorpion when it was like rage.
Yeah,
Hulk-
that was not
hulking out.
unexpected, but also I was like, oh.
It kind of
This
was
is like-
mirrored Tom Holland's Spider-Man when he's popping off on
Green
Norman.
Goblin. Yeah.
Yeah, in the most recent Spider-Man film. And he kind of like needs one of the other. I think it was Toby that was like, "Hey,
Yeah.
you're gonna regret this. Like, don't do that." So I kind of it was great. I loved how I felt like Peter was written really well. Is it better than X-Men '97?
Yes.
You think it was better?
Arguably so. Not like a huge difference, but there's scenes in X-Men '97 that I could have done without.
Okay.
For example, like that Rogue Magneto scene.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like X-Men 97, as great as it was, it tried to tackle, like, X-Men 97 very much felt like here, episode 1 to 3 is one story, episode 4 to 6 is one story.
Which I don't
Like,
mind.
I don't mind. But this, I think, was a solid way to be like, here's a nice introductory, here's 10 episodes, one cohesive story.
It's
with
kind of
many
connected to
things
the
in
MCU,
between.
but it's not really
Yeah.
the MCU, which is nice, which goes both ways. It's fun for someone who knows the MCU, but
Yeah.
you don't actually need to know the MCU.
Exactly. I think that's the best way. Yeah. You don't need to know every little ins and out of the MCU. If you want a fun Spider-Man show,
Just want to enjoy
go
Spider-Man
right
show.
ahead. If you want to rock out to a sick Spider-Man song,
Could also be a good introduction for someone to Spider-Man in general.
yeah.
Just have fun learning about some of the character and their villains, and
Even outside of that, like even like the subtle Thunderbolt Ross pop up, or Iron Man, or Finesse, or Daredevil, like it literally gives you so many intros to different characters, both heroes, villains, anti-heroes,
agreed, yeah.
etc. To be like, oh, where can I jump in after this? You know,
I agree. For sure.
what would you give it out of 10?
Definitely an 8.
8.
Solid 8. Would recommend, for sure.
It's on Disney Plus. If you got Disney Plus, obviously, I feel like any Marvel it's just coming on
Yeah, if
Disney
you like what
Plus,
you
like
know,
just
you know.
But
Yeah, let's hope for a second season sooner than later, for sure. Yep.
and,
But other than that, guys, we speaking of Spider-Man, if you want more Spider-Man content,
let us know.
check
We
out
could-
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays.
Troy is streaming on the
Right.
Nerdy Misfit Gaming, where he's streaming the Spider-Man 2 right now. And yeah, sometimes he also streams on other days, so join the Discord to see when he streams and to join us in conversation.
Exactly. If you want us to talk about more about Spider-Man, you guys let us know. If you guys want us to do a ranking of the Spider-Man movies, or do some blind rank of Spider-Man, or rank the Spider-Man animations throughout the years.
Yeah,
anything, Connor and I are quite the Spider-Man fans,
we're fanboys.
fanboys of the Spider-Man.
So drop a comment down below and let us know what you want to see. If you want to see any more future Spider-Man content, or just let us know what you want to see, and we'll
Exactly.
do our best to produce that content.
Heck yeah. But until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next Wednesday and every Wednesday and after that.
Exactly. Goodbye.
All right. Bye.
TNMP, the Nerdy Misfit Podcast. Don't forget to join the island by dropping a follow. Thank you. And see you next week.